Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 27, Qualitative Data Formatting and Processing. The previous units of this block have familiarized you with some of the key methods of gathering data employed by qualitative researchers. The process of discovery and learning embarked upon whilst gathering data is no doubt an exciting and memorable one. However, there comes a point when field notes and interview pages gathered by you must be formatted, processed, and analyzed. Some other questions that confront the researcher at this point are: how can I make sense of all this material? How can I organize it to make it meaningful to others and myself? How do I put it all together so as to present a concise and thoughtful formulation of the topic under study? Hardly any researcher would initiate the process of investigation without at least a mental checklist of type of material that is to be gathered. A systematic listing of the topics to be covered is always very useful. Elaine has mentioned the following three forms of checklists. Checklists encoded in questionnaire forms. Checklists employed in the context of semi-informal interviews. Background checklists for occasional reference and to provide guidelines for research in general. The idea of mentioning these checklists in the introduction of Unit 27 is to remind you that in order to format and process your field material, you need to refer to these checklists to find out if you have actually completed what you had set out to find out. Only after this initial exercise are you to proceed for qualitative data processing and analysis. Now let us move to the next point, qualitative data processing and analysis. The key word that this process entails is analysis. Qualitative analysis requires dialectic between ideas and qualitative data. You may ask, what are qualitative data? You cannot analyze our qualitative data without ideas, but our ideas must be shaped and tested by the data we are analyzing. You cannot make an omelette without breaking and then beating together eggs. Analysis also involves breaking down data into bits and then beating the bits together so that the data is resolved into its component and its characteristic elements are revealed. In this sense, you can say that we split data processing into two activities, namely checking and converting the data or breaking the eggs, and generating metadata, beating together. The first activity comprises checking out the completeness and quality of data, the relationship between data, for example, interviews, field notes, audio or video recording, etc., and an anonymization, and converting data or transferring data to a format that is appropriate for dissemination. At this time, apart from checking out the completeness and quality in terms of their physical conditions, readability, audibility, reusability, a researcher needs to bring to light any problems relating to confidentiality, anonymity, reusing, suitability for digitalization, etc. We have mentioned above the term anonymization. Let us explain that this term means. It refers to maintaining the confidentiality of the respondent or any other person or entity. It is important to discuss the level of anonymization you arrive at in your research. In some cases, it is not easy to distinguish the identity of the subjects of research without bringing about an unacceptable distortion to the data. This implies that the particular data can hardly be reused for any purpose. The level of anonymization you use for a data set depends on the nature of the study, and each case has its own unique set of concerns. Here come in issues of an ethical and legal nature with respect to maintaining confidentiality where requested. In practical terms, all this means that you remove all identifiers and replace them with pseudonyms where appropriate. Care should be taken to use some pseudonyms throughout. It is strongly advised to delete from the data any slanderous or libellous comment. The second processing activity of generating metadata refers to the contextual information that a researcher obtains during processing. For example, you may create lists of data giving biographical inputs that would make it easier to identify transcripts or make sure that interviewee and interviewer names and questions or topic guide headers are put in place. The main function of this exercise is to make it easier for the researcher to locate transcripts or particular item in a data set. You will find a definition of the metadata set. Further, please note that about digitalization of data, you will read in detail in the units of the block 8, and you will not include this factor in this unit. How do we carry out the above two processes without getting into the mechanical mode of processing? We need to proceed to analyzing our data. The aim of analysis is not just description, but interpretation, explanation, understanding, and possibly prediction. Description provides the basis for analysis, which then lays the base for further description. We break down our data in order to draw concepts from it, which we then use to classify the data. We draw connections between the different concepts, and then connections form the basis for further description. Jan Day presents the following diagram, which distinctly represents the circular processes involved in qualitative analysis. At the vertices of the triangle, there are describing, connecting, and classifying. And in the center of the triangle and triangle inscribed in a circle is qualitative analysis. Let us briefly consider each of the processes mentioned in previous content in our next session. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with a self-learning podcast.